Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, the masterpiece of a game, is finally out. Or at least it should be out in most locations when you're watching this video. Some of you might be getting it later tonight or tomorrow morning. Anyways, I was lucky enough to get early access to this game since about Friday, and I played through the entire game. And now I wanted to share my full thoughts on everything in the game, all the mechanics, the humor, and, well, the full game. Does it live up to our expectations? So see this as my review video of the game, although I don't really like to call it review videos because I will be doing like 100 more videos on this game, both on this channel and especially on my second channel. But at least you will find my fairly condensed thoughts in this video. So let's dive straight into it. First of all, let's get the basics out of the way. Like I said, I got access around Friday and I played on the Xbox One S. The reason for this is simply because there were some issues with the PC codes, so I couldn't get them before the weekend, so I had to like panic and dig up my old console, which I haven't touched for like 3 years. But I managed to get it up and running so that I could play Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. Unfortunately, I don't have a next-gen console, which is why I had to play on the Xbox One S. And I will be getting to the performance later in the video. But I also wanted to note that this was a very, very, very rushed playthrough. It took me about 13.5 hours, but I literally only played the story missions as fast as I could. Not like a speed run, but I skipped every single collectible, side mission, puzzle, all that kind of stuff, simply because I wanted to play through the entire game so I could create some content for you guys, both with clips and this video and so on. So although it took only quote-unquote 13.5 hours, there was so much more stuff to do. It would have taken me 2 or 3 times longer if I played the game normally, and it kind of pained me every single time I saw a mini kit or a kyber brick that I simply skipped. I actually think that I got around 15% of all the kyber bricks, so that's like nothing. I think I got around 150 out of 1166, so that just shows you how little of the collectible stuff I did. I just wanted to make that very clear because I know there's gonna be some people saying, oh my god, the game only took 13.5 hours to play, but I mean that's just the story, and there is so much more to this game that I will be doing on my live streams, because that's something I wanted to clear up very quickly. A lot of you wanted to see me play this game on the stream, and of course I will. That was a very rushed playthrough just for the content. Now I can actually calm down, play the game on PC as well, hopefully, the way I want. Do all the collectibles, get all the studs, True Jedi. So yeah, I will be playing it from scratch only on the stream, so you will be able to follow me from start to finish when I try to 100% the entire game. Don't worry about that. Sure, it might not be my super first impressions on like the cinematics and happenings, but it's not a huge like spoiler heavy game, so it's not really gonna be a problem. I think you guys will enjoy watching me play, and I will definitely enjoy playing the game the way it's supposed to be, not rushed like I just did. So how is the game then? Well, in short, the game is basically everything I had hoped for. It lived up to almost every little thing that I hoped this game would improve from the previous Lego games. I had a blast from start to finish, and honestly, one thing that stuck out to me the most is probably like the storytelling, the writing, and the cinematics, because like we gotta remember the previous Lego games have just had mumble mode. You don't really talk about lines and stuff like that, but my god, it was such a good decision to do that, with the voice acting from the Clone Wars actors, and the game actually totaled to around almost 2 hours of cinematics. I think 1 hour and 45 minutes, because I'm actually gonna have 2 huge videos up, one with the full gameplay playthrough and one with all of the cinematics, if you're interested in that. So out of those 13.5 hours, more than 1.5 hours were full of cinematics, with fantastic writing, hilarious gags, and even when you're not in a cinematic, the random background characters like stormtroopers or clones or droids will just pull these random one-liners that makes you laugh out of nowhere. And to me, that has to be the highlight of the game. Everything was great with the gameplay and whatnot, but the fact that you got a genuine laugh out of the game randomly, almost all the time throughout the entire playthrough, no matter if it was the sequel or the prequel trilogy. There was so much good stuff, and they made such humoristic twists on the most iconic scenes from the movies, whether it's Anakin versus Obi-Wan, or it's like Grievous and Obi-Wan's dance-off battle, or Palpatine when he dies in episode 9. asks for Anakin's help, but he's not there, obviously. Just those small things that were just so good. And Jar Jar. I have to bring up Jar Jar. I don't think I would ever say this, but I think Jar Jar might almost be the highlight of the entire prequel trilogy. They made him so ridiculously stupid that you couldn't just not laugh. It was great. So yeah, if you're planning to play the game yourself, you're gonna be in for a treat, and if you're not planning to play it, watch all the cinematics, watch all the funny clips I'm gonna put up on my second channel, because there's just so much stuff. I'm already excited to play the game again, although I literally finished it like 5 hours ago. I spent like 5 hours every day during the weekend playing this while also making content. So it's not the kind of way I wanted to play the game where I rushed through it, but I'm still so excited to get into it again and try to get 100%. So how about the actual the gameplay, the combat more specifically? Well, the combat has been vastly improved. The old games were kind of just spam click and hope for the best. It didn't really matter too much when it came to like, well, combat. I mean, obviously we have these puzzles you always have to solve, but in terms of the combat, it was kind of mindless in the old games, and it still can be. You can still just kind of plow through everything, and that's mostly what I did. But the fact that you can still combine different attack buttons, and if you're a blaster wielder, you can go for headshots, which will actually knock off their helmets and then they die in the next shot, and you can pick up objects and throw. That was probably one of the most fun things in my opinion. I actually went full on upgrades on my Jedi because I knew I would be playing a lot of Jedi during the story, so I upgraded the increased throw object damage to the max upgrade, which I think almost doubled it, which meant that I could actually tear through the bosses pretty quickly by simply just picking up objects and throwing them. I thought that was one of the most fun things to do, and probably the thing I did the most as a Jedi. Obviously you can also throw your lightsaber, do jump attacks and dodge, so there's a lot of mechanics that adds a bit of depth, but not too much, and not something you have to really think of. You kind of can just go in and spam click your attack button, really. Sure, they're gonna block you after a while, but you will eventually do damage, and if you don't do well, you will just die and respawn. Lego games are very forgiving, so I think they took the combat to a very good level. Also, something I want to mention is that I realized after like half my playthrough that I had all the help settings enabled. Apparently they're all enabled by default, like the homing shots, the lock on, near target, the lock on, all those kind of settings were on by default. And I thought I just had like a slight aim assist on, but apparently it was all on. And I kind of enjoyed it, especially since I was playing with a controller, which I'm not used to. So at first I was like, should I disable them and make it a bit harder? And then I was like, nah, it's a Lego game. I don't feel like I need to make it more challenging. So I just kept all those settings on, and I guess that's the way they intend the game to be played, since that was enabled by default. But if there's something I want to complain about with the combat, it's actually the boss fights. The boss fights overall are great. They have a lot of varying mechanics, and stuff like that, but every time you fight against a boss, your camera gets 100% locked on the boss, so you can't turn in any other direction. And I found this to be very annoying, especially since I like to do the whole run around, pick up objects and throw at the boss tactic, and I couldn't do that, or I had to like back up into objects and hope that they would be in my line of sight so I could pick them up. It was very awkward. If you're just gonna go in for lightsaber combat, fine, then I guess the camera lock on doesn't matter. But as someone who wanted to pick up and throw objects, I found it to be really annoying, and I would have preferred if I could just run around freely like you do when you're not fighting a boss, because then you can just pick up anything and throw. It might be a minor detail, and most of you will probably like it, but I would have liked to at least have a button where I can just go like unlock camera or something, so I can go around in that room and actually pick up objects, because I could see the objects but I couldn't pick them up because I couldn't turn the camera. So that was something that was a little bit annoying. If we talk a little bit about the performance and the bugs then, because that's obviously always important. Performance-wise, it was pretty good. I have to say that there was a couple of occasions where I had some pretty serious FPS drops that were quite annoying, especially on like the droid factory and a couple of other levels. And I'm not really sure if this is something with my Xbox or if this is gonna be normal, because Sam, who also helped me out with some videos, played through the game on his PlayStation 4 and he had no FPS drops. And I think my Xbox One S should be stronger than the PlayStation 4. I could be wrong there, so I'm not sure why I got those FPS drops, to be completely honest. And there was also a few occasions where you just loaded into a map and it would be like just blurry. It was really weird. It was almost like I was wondering if I screwed screwed up a setting or something, but it would usually pan out. It wasn't a huge deal. Those FPS drops was the main thing that annoyed me on some levels, but I mean, considering it was like 45 levels in total, and there was maybe 2 of them that I felt the FPS drops too much on, it wasn't too bad. In terms of bugs, there was really only one major bug I experienced throughout the entire playthrough, and that was for the Luke versus Vader battle on episode 5, because I couldn't switch back from R2, so I kind of got stuck in this phase where I couldn't do anything. The health bar for Vader didn't show up, I couldn't switch back to Luke, and I thought I would have to restart the level, but eventually I just started poking Vader and his health bar then showed up, and I was able to kill him as R2-D2, which then triggered the next phase and I could switch back to Luke. So it was a bit of an awkward fight, maybe not what you want to see, R2 versus Vader, but it worked out in the end, so I didn't have any occasion where I had to restart a level like I've had to do in like the Clone Wars game, as you guys might remember. So overall, in terms of bugs, really not a big problem at all. That was the one bug I experienced. The rest of the game was really smooth. So what about the whole open world and free roam element? Again, I didn't do too much free roaming simply because I just played through the story, so I didn't have time to do the free roaming, so I don't feel like I can judge it too much. But what I really liked is that basically in between every story mission you get to a free roam area, so you don't just go level, but sometimes there might even be like 15 minutes in between 2 levels where you have to do some exploring on a planet and also do, I guess it's like an extra mission, or it's as a connecting mission. I'm not sure what to call them because they're not actual levels that you will get like a true Jedi on, but it's still something you have to do for the story to get to the next part, and they will usually be part of the free roaming. So I really enjoy this free roaming part, and I think that's like a reason that's why this game is going to add so much playtime, and why I don't think 14 hours of playtime is really representative of how you're supposed to play this game, because I don't think anyone was going to rush through the game like I did. But I did just a couple of puzzles on the free roaming because I felt like I really had to. And it just showed that there's so much stuff to do. I mean, you can run around on almost any planet or in the space to engage in space encounters. So the whole open world and free roam part is an amazing upgrade. The only thing I was a bit disappointed with here is that a lot of the free roaming parts, such as Coruscant, are basically a lot of small levels built together. So either you have to take a taxi in between the different areas, or you have to walk through these like glowing doors which loads in the next level. So I think that's simply a performance thing where they couldn't make the maps too big, and so you have to do a lot of loading screens. It is a bit annoying, and sometimes it felt that there was a lot of loading screens, but I still have to take in consideration that I played on an Xbox One S, so anyone playing on like a newer generation console or PC is probably gonna have a smoother experience, and the loading screens weren't that bad, but I would have liked to see it smoother. But again, I totally understand for performance reasons why they couldn't make it too huge with the open world roaming. And if you talk a little bit about the length of the levels, I think a lot of people were afraid that they were going to be too short, and I can agree that some parts that were like basically remade versions of what happened in the movie felt a bit rushed, but after a while I realized it's for the better, because if it was like a one-to-one to the movies, it would feel too slow. And some scenes and actions in the movies, they kind of weaved together in a very nice way where you would almost like skip in between 2 scenes, but it still made sense. So I thought they did a really good job of that. And also something that I appreciate is that the levels were a bit shorter than the old games, but it also meant way less repetitive stuff. And considering that we still got like 14 hours out of a rushed playthrough, and then you have all the side stuff you can do, which is going to take you another 20-30 hours probably. I appreciate that they made the level short, and that each section or ship you had to play through a few corridors, and that was it, instead of the endless waves of enemies that you would have in some of the old games, which sure, it extended your playtime, but I don't know how much value it actually added. It just got repetitive in the end. So because there's so many movies, scenes and planets in this game, we still get a little bit of everything, and it becomes a more varied playthrough. And while we're talking about that, I wanted to bring up a few things that I noticed through my playthrough. Obviously, I didn't have a chance to really play all classes too much since I followed the story. In free play, you can choose freely, obviously. But I like that even though you play the story in the kind of forced way where you have to choose the characters that they decide, I still got to experience new things after I had played more than half the game. Like when we got to Endor, you get to play the scavenger class as the Ewok, and suddenly you start creating these random gadgets that you can use, like a wall breaker, which means you can get through walls that I couldn't during the first like 6 episodes, or this glider that you can then use to fly in between the trees, and then that means you can use that on all scavengers. So same thing goes for Ray later in the playthrough, where you can use the net launcher to like get up on places that you previously couldn't. So I liked this variation in between the classes, and I mean, I only like scratched the surface with the upgrades. Like I said, I upgraded the force throw on the Jedi, but I also did some quality of life stuff, such as getting the bypass thing on the astromech, so I didn't have to do all these puzzles. I could just press a button and skip them. And I also added what I would like to call the bowling attack on astromechs, where you could kind of slide into enemies in full speed and knock them down and damage them. So that worked for both BB-8 and R2-D2 obviously, which I also thought was quite fun. But there's like 4 upgrades on each of the classes, so there's way more you can do. Another mechanic which I really enjoyed, and I have to say I was disappointed that they kind of underutilized it, were these weapon boxes that I've showed previously that you can access on, I guess, the Death Star and Starkiller base. At least that's the only 2 places I found them. And if you are playing as a Stormtrooper, or if you put on a full suit of Stormtrooper armor, you can open them up and pick up these temporary weapons that you can fire a bit with. Whether it's a rocket launcher, a flamethrower, or a heavy repeater, I thought it was really fun because it added so much variation to the blaster combat. But the downside was that I think I got to use it like 2 times or maybe 3 times during my entire playthrough. And when you did, you got to fire for 30 seconds and then the weapon ran out of ammo, or you picked it up and then you entered a cinematic and threw it away. So that was a big disappointment to me, as I really enjoyed that mechanic. I got to fire a few rocket launcher shots, it was great. I fired a heavy repeater, it was awesome, but I want more of that. I don't see why not all classes could pick it up, or at least maybe the Scoundrel or the Scavenger, because now it became something that I used for maybe 3 minutes out of my 14-hour playthrough. A really fun mechanic, and maybe we will get to use it more in free play. But I thought it was a little bit underutilized because it was great. The rocket launcher worked fantastically, the heavy repeater worked fantastically as well. But yeah, I think that wraps up my full thoughts on this game. There's obviously gonna be a bit more I need to add on the whole 100%ing free roam Kyber brick collecting part, but I don't think it's fair to do that after this kind of playthrough. But you will all see it live on my streams as well. But in terms of the big part of the game, the story and how I played through, I am really happy with it. It turned out just as well as I had hoped for. A few small things like with the performance and open world that weren't like 100%, but I will say that the game definitely lived up to my expectations, and it definitely surpassed my expectations when it came to the writing, cinematics and humor. So I think this is the kind of game that everyone's gonna enjoy playing or watching. And honestly, if you don't care about playing through it yourself, watch the cinematic movie. It's gonna be up on my channel very shortly after this one, where it's basically all like 1 hour and 45 minutes of cinematics put together to one big video, because that's basically gonna be like a Lego movie, the Skywalker Saga Lego movie, and it's gonna be awesome. So yeah, I would highly recommend that if you're not planning to play through the game yourself. But yeah, that wraps up this video. Stay tuned for so much more content on this channel, and my second channel is gonna have literally hundreds of clips up. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, may the force be with you.